Death, loss, betrayal. The happening that cannot be undone, the sentence that cannot be unsaid, the version of life that ends before you were ready. Pain in its first form is often honest, not gentle, not fair, not easy to survive, but honest. Something happened. Then the mind wakes up around it. It reaches for explanation, it arranges blame, it searches for meaning, it looks for a place to stand. And sometimes the story that helps us survive becomes the story that keeps us from living. Not all at once, not loudly, not with some dramatic announcement that says, "You are now entering the part where your mind starts making things worse." It happens quietly. A fact becomes a story. A story becomes a defense becomes a habit becomes a way of seeing becomes a life. And years later, we may still call it pain. But it is not only pain anymore. It has been sat with, it has been carried, it has been stared into, it has been asked to redeem us, and now we are not only suffering from what happened, we are suffering from what we built around what happened. That is the place I want to go. Not to explain suffering away, not to make grief smaller than it is. There are things that happen in life that do not need a lesson attached to them 5 minutes later. Sometimes the only honest thing to say is, "This hurts. This changed me. I do not know how to live with this yet." Human beings have been trying to understand that pain forever. The Buddha leaves the palace and sees what the palace kept from him: a sick body, an aging body, a corpse, a lonely man. The things no life escapes, not just suffering, but the shock of seeing that life cannot be made safe enough to protect us from being human. And when that shock is too much, the mind looks for a way out. It numbs, it judges, it escapes into pleasure, into punishment, it leaves the body while the body is still standing there. Buddhist teachers call this bare attention, seeing what is arising before the mind turns it into craving, aversion, or story. Sit with it. Do not turn away. Do not make the pain holy. Do not make yourself guilty for having it. Build a place inside yourself where the unbearable can be felt without being denied. That matters, because some pain has never been honestly held. But holding pain is not the same as seeing what the mind has built around it. A person can accept pain and still refuse to examine the machinery that keeps turning pain into suffering. Suffering can be made heroic. It can become a mountain we keep climbing because the climb gives us an identity. It can become proof that we are strong, serious, disciplined, chosen, forged. And there is a quiet danger in that. Because sometimes the person carrying the burden does not want to put it down. Without it, they would have to meet themselves without the nobility of endurance. There's a strange comfort in being wronged. It gives the mind somewhere to stand. There is also a strange comfort in being the one who carries more than everyone else. It lets us suffer and feel superior at the same time. So responsibility matters. But if responsibility becomes theater, the factory of suffering keeps running. There is a darker voice among the suffering, the one that does not want to comfort suffering, the one that does not want to carry it uphill, the one that looks straight into despair and refuses to decorate the room. Sioran did that. He looked at misery, death, meaninglessness, loneliness, and the absurd without rushing toward hope. He did not trust the systems we build to soften existence: religion, philosophy, moral codes, happiness, progress. He saw how easily they can become covers for the things we do not want to face. And there is truth there. Modern life hides suffering, we hide the sick. We hide the dying. We make grief efficient. We turn pain into content, diagnosis, branding, recovery language, achievement, a filtered confession under good lighting. We do not eliminate despair. We manage its appearance. Sioran understood that much of what we call happiness is just motion. Another purchase, another meal, another trip, another goal, another small anesthesia, not because joy is false. Joy is not false. But the pursuit of happiness can become one more way to outrun the truth. There are facts we use to become honest, and facts we use to stay hidden. The fact that life is painful can make us honest. It can also make us vain. Despair can become an atmosphere we learn to admire. We can start to feel deeper because we hurt. We can begin to suspect that ordinary happiness is shallow because it does not look like our suffering. And that is another trap. Not because despair has no truth in it. It does. But if despair becomes beautiful, we may stop wanting to leave it. We may not enjoy suffering exactly, but we may enjoy what suffering seems to say about us. Dostoevsky gives us Raskolnikov before the crime, alone in a room, thinking. That is where it starts, not with blood, with an idea. Some people are ordinary. Some people are allowed to step over the line. The thought gives him distance from himself. Then he acts. And the idea does not survive the room. The body is still a body. The blood is not philosophical. He wanted to rise above ordinary morality. Instead, he falls beneath his own conscience. That is Dostoevsky's suffering. The moment the story can no longer carry what we did. We know this in smaller ways. We say the thing. We go silent. We punish. We explain ourselves before the truth can speak. And maybe the explanation works on everyone else, but not on us. There is grace in that. A person can suffer enough to become honest, but even guilt can become another story. Even confession can become theater. Even redemption can become a way to stay the main character. Healing begins when the story that once protected us is no longer allowed to be sacred. And that is where I find myself standing when I wrote The Idiot Factory. Not above these other views, not against them, near them, learning from them, but looking at a different part of the process. The Buddha gives us acceptance. Jordan Peterson gives us responsibility. Sioran gives us the nerve to look into despair without immediately covering it with sunshine. Dostoevsky gives us conscience, guilt, moral exposure, and the possibility of redemption. I respect all of that, but I keep coming back to the moment after pain. What does the mind do next? What begins to operate? What story becomes useful? What defense becomes familiar? What explanation lets us sleep? What resentment gives us energy? What identity forms around the wound? What part of us becomes loyal to the suffering because the suffering has started to make sense? That is the Idiot Factory. Not the book I wrote, but the actual factory we all run in our heads. The factory is not the pain itself. The pain may be real. The pain may be unavoidable. The pain may be nobody's fault. The factory is what we build after pain when we cannot bear to meet reality cleanly. And I say we, because I mean we. Not you people, not those broken people, not the weak, not the unaware. We do this. You do, I do. The mind begins working on pain almost immediately. It adds meaning. It adds blame. It adds prediction. It adds self-protection. It adds a private courtroom. It adds witnesses. It adds exhibits. It adds speeches. It adds a version of the future where this never happens again. And sometimes it adds just enough truth to keep the whole thing believable. That is what makes the Idiot Factory hard to see. It does not run only on lies. It runs on useful truths. Yes, they hurt you. Yes, you were betrayed. Yes, it was unfair. Yes, that grief is real. Yes, you had to survive. But the question is not only whether the story contains facts. The question is what the story is doing now. That does not mean those views are wrong. They are not. They can make us healthier. They can give us language. They can pull us out of isolation. They can help us endure what would otherwise crush us. But they can also give suffering a better costume. And if the costume is beautiful enough, or noble enough, or tender enough, or spiritually meaningful enough, we may never ask whether we are free. We may only ask whether our suffering has been properly honored. What if learning from pain does not require building a life around it? What if the thing that hurt us deserves to be taken seriously, but not allowed to become the author of everything that follows? That is the question my book Idiot Factory keeps asking. Not how do we make suffering meaningful enough to keep? How do we see clearly enough to stop manufacturing more of it? Because pain is part of life. There is no philosophy that gets us out of that. People die, bodies fail, love ends, trust breaks. The past cannot be revised. No book, practice, theory, religion, or motivational speech saves us from being human. But suffering changes when our relationship to pain changes. Not when we deny pain, not when we conquer it, not when we turn it into art, not when we turn it into a sacred story about who we became. It changes when we stop adding to it unconsciously, when we stop treating every feeling like evidence, when we stop letting resentment operate as clarity, when we stop confusing rumination with truth, when we stop mistaking a familiar story for an honest one. I can sit in the theater of suffering for years, replaying the scene with better dialogue. But resentment is not proof that we are right. It is proof something needs to be examined. Maybe something outside us is wrong. Maybe something inside us is unfinished. Maybe both. But resentment does not want examination. It wants rehearsal. It wants the scene again. It wants the argument again. It wants the person who hurt us to finally understand, confess, collapse, apologize, suffer, repair the world. And sometimes they should, but sometimes they never will. Then what? Do we stay in the idiot factory until they arrive? Do we keep the machines running because someone else has not come back to turn them off? That is where honesty becomes mercy, even when it feels cruel at first. Honesty says, "This happened, this hurt, this changed me. And this is what I have been doing with it." Not to shame ourselves. Shame is just another production line. But to see, to become factual, to stop polishing the story long enough to notice the machinery behind it. That is humility, not humiliation. Humility, the ability to stand inside reality without asking reality to protect our image of ourselves. Humility says, I was hurt, and I may have hurt others from that place. I was wronged, and maybe that is why I do not want to make suffering more beautiful than it is. I do not want to make it heroic. I do not want to make it sentimental. I do not want to make it sacred. I want to see what it is connected to. I want to see what it is powering. I want to see where the wires go. Because if we can see that, maybe we can stop feeding it. Maybe not all at once, maybe not forever, but for a moment. And sometimes a moment outside the factory is enough to remember there is an outside. Thank you for spending your time with me to explore suffering and the machinery that keeps us trapped. Subscribe to this channel or check out truthtoldsideways.com for more chapter reads, videos, articles, and information on my book, Idiot Factory. Idiot Factory by Brent is now available on Amazon.